So when we think about hypnosis, most people picture something quite dramatic, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like someone's eyes swirling, they're asleep on stage, maybe totally under someone else's power.
Right, the whole stage show vibe.
But our source material today kind of flips that whole idea on its head,
It really does.
suggesting it's actually more about a focused way of communicating and paying attention.
Precisely. And this is a deep dive crafted specifically for you, the listener, someone who wants to get to grips with complex ideas, quickly and thoroughly.
Okay.
We're diving into Trance-formations, neuro-linguistic programming, and the structure of hypnosis. It's by John Grinder and Richard Bandler, edited by Connery Andreas.
Right, 1981, a classic in NLP circles.
Definitely. And NLP, just real quick, is basically a way to understand the patterns and how we think and behave. It offers tools to maybe shift those patterns if you want.
And this book focuses specifically on hypnosis within that.
Exactly. How those NLP patterns relate to what we call hypnosis or trance states.
Okay, let's unpack this then. So the book's mission, it sounds like, was to take this seemingly mysterious topic.
Yeah, pull back the curtain.
And show that it's actually a set of learnable skills, communication skills.
That's the core idea. And the really interesting part, I think, is that they argue these aren't just for therapists, in a clinic.
Oh.
They believe these skills have much broader applications in our everyday lives, really.
Interesting. So what's our goal today?
Well, our goal in this deep dive is to pull out the key insights from Trance-formations for you. We'll be exploring what these trance states actually are,
right,
the processes involved and how they're induced, and maybe most importantly, how they can be utilized in practical ways.
Okay.
And we'll be drawing directly from the exercises, the discussions in the book itself, to give you a really solid and, well, hopefully kind of an eye-opening understanding.
Sounds good. So where does the book start?
Right at the beginning, it tackles the word hypnosis head on. The foreword points out that it's just a word loaded with baggage, isn't it? It triggers strong images.
Yeah, like we said, stage shows where people cluck like chickens.
Right, or maybe this underlying fear people have of losing control.
Definitely.
But what's fascinating is the immediate alternative perspective the book offers. It flips it.
How so?
Instead of some external mysterious force, they basically propose that hypnosis is, well, a completely natural human experience.
Natural, everyday natural.
Yeah, think about those moments when you're completely absorbed in something, maybe a really good conversation, or you're immersed in a video game.
Or reading a great book.
Yeah, exactly. Or even just lost in thought listening to music. In those moments, the outside world just kind of fades away, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's like you're in a little bubble of intense focus.
That's precisely the kind of everyday experience the book uses as an analogy. They suggest that state, that concentrated attention, is actually very similar to what we call a trance state.
Okay, that makes it much less...
It does. And here's where it gets, I think, really interesting. They highlight that we encounter common, simple hypnotic patterns in everyday communication, constantly.
Without realizing it.
Totally unaware.
Okay, you got to give me an example of that. That sounds surprising.
Okay, well, think about negative commands. Yeah. When you tell someone, especially maybe a kid, don't think about a blue car. What's the very first thing that pops into their head?
A blue car, of course.
Right. The instruction itself directs their focus straight to the very thing you want them to avoid. Or like telling a child, don't spill the milk.
Increases the chance they will spill it. I've seen that happen.
Exactly. The book argues that just understanding these subtle linguistic patterns gives you real insight into how language subtly shapes our focus and our responses all the time.
Wow. Okay, so it's not about some, mind control guru.
Not at all.
But about how we often unintentionally direct attention just with the words we choose.
Yeah.
Okay. So after understanding that, what's next in grasping these states?
Well, building on this idea of where attention goes, the book introduces calibration.
Calibration? What's that?
It's basically the skill of keenly observing, really noticing and interpreting the subtle physiological and behavioral cues that can indicate when someone is shifting into a more focused state.
So it's like learning to read people better, but not mind reading.
Exactly, not mind reading, but definitely a heightened sensitivity to nonverbal communication, things you can actually see and hear.
Like what? What kind of things?
The book gives examples like noticing changes in someone's breathing, maybe it gets shallower or deeper, or subtle shifts in skin tone, sometimes a slight flush, or changes in their eye movements, maybe their eyes become very still, or you see a little fluttering of the eyelids, even changes in muscle tension, like shoulders relaxing.
Okay, observable things.
Yes, the crucial point is these are observable signals, things you can train yourself to notice.
So learning to calibrate to really see these subtle shifts helps you build rapport, that connection. And it's this rapport, this connection, that kind of creates the context for guiding attention, for what the book calls inductions.
Precisely. The book really emphasizes that to create an environment where these focus states, these trance states, can emerge easily, you need that foundation of trust and mutual understanding, rapport.
Right.
And one of the key ways they suggest building that rapport is through matching and mirroring.
Matching and mirroring. So like subtly copying someone's posture or their tone of voice. Is that the idea?
That's exactly it. By gently and usually unconsciously mirroring aspects of someone's verbal stuff, like their tempo or tone and their nonverbal behavior, like posture or gestures,
Oh, right.
you can create this subconscious feeling of being understood, of being on the same wavelength. It builds trust quickly.
And that makes them more receptive to focusing their attention where you guide it.
Yeah, it really facilitates that focused attention we've been talking about. It's like you're creating a comfortable, familiar space for that deeper focus to happen naturally.
Okay, this is painting a very different picture of hypnosis. It's grounded in attention, communication, connection.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you actually do it? How do you guide someone into one of these states using these ideas?
Right. So the book moves into practical techniques. It starts with what they call simple inductions.
Simple inductions.
Okay. These are basically exercises, really straightforward exercises designed to intentionally direct someone's attention in a very specific way.
How simple are we talking?
Well, they describe exercise 1 where someone just intensely focuses on a really simple everyday experience. Something like the physical sensations of jogging or maybe the visual details of watching TV.
And what do they do with that focus?
They describe it internally, but in really vivid detail. The whole idea is that this concentrated, directed focus, just doing that, begins to create a shift in their state of awareness.
Huh. Interesting. So just really concentrating deeply on something ordinary can kickstart this whole process.
Oh, apparently so.
What did people in the book say they noticed when they did this exercise? Any specific changes?
Yeah, the book shares examples where people reported feeling actual, tangible physical changes.
Right.
Shifts in their breathing patterns, maybe noticing new or altered sensations in their body, or sometimes just a much stronger sense of being really present in the experience they were focusing on.
Wow.
It's pretty remarkable how focusing intently, even on just a mundane memory, can trigger these noticeable internal shifts.
Yeah, it really highlights how connected our mental focus is to our physical state, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the book underscores a really crucial principle at this stage: utilization.
Utilization, meaning using what happens.
Exactly. Instead of trying to force a specific reaction or expecting a certain outcome during these exercises, the key is to work with whatever responses the individual actually gives you. Acknowledge them.
So if someone starts feeling, I don't know, unexpectedly sad or happy during the exercise, you don't try to steer them back to the original focus.
Precisely. You don't ignore it or try to correct it. The book gives examples where someone might suddenly feel a totally different emotion or have a seemingly unrelated memory pop up.
Okay.
The practitioner, using utilization, would acknowledge that feeling or memory and actually weave it into the process. It's about being flexible, being really responsive to whatever the person is experiencing right then.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah.
You can't really script someone's internal world, can you?
Not at all. And another fundamental piece in these inductions is the deliberate use of sensory-based language.
Sensory language. So using words that appeal to sight, sound, touch.
Sight, sound, touch, smell, taste the works. The book really emphasizes the power of using rich, detailed descriptions that actively engage the senses. Why? Because that's incredibly effective at drawing someone's attention inward.
So instead of just saying relax, you might describe, I don't know, the feeling of warmth spreading through your hands, or hearing the gentle rhythm of your own breathing.
Exactly like that. By painting a vivid, multisensory picture with your words, you're much more likely to capture and hold someone's attention, gently guiding it away from outside distractions and inward towards their own internal landscape.
Okay, I think I'm getting the hang of the basics. Simple inductions, rapport, calibration, utilization, sensory language. What about the more advanced stuff? Does it get more complex?
It definitely builds. The book moves into some more intricate territory. One really significant concept they introduce is anchoring.
Anchoring. Okay, what's that about?
Anchoring is essentially the process of creating a strong association between a specific feeling or an emotional state and a particular sensory stimulus.
A stimulus like?
It could be almost anything distinct. A specific touch on the arm, maybe a particular word or phrase, even a gesture.
Oh, kind of like how hearing a certain song can just instantly take you back to a specific time or feeling from your past.
That's a perfect everyday analogy for it.
Yeah.
Once an anchor is set up properly, that specific stimulus, the touch, the word, whatever it is, can be used later to reliably bring back or re-access that associated feeling or state.
Okay.
And the book explains how this can be a really powerful tool for helping people make changes.
That's really fascinating. So you could potentially create an anchor, like a touch on your wrist, that triggers a feeling of calm or confidence when you need it.
That's exactly the kind of application they discuss. Another really important advanced technique they explore is reframing.
Reframing.
Yeah.
Changing the frame, like changing how you see something.
Pretty much. It involves changing the meaning or the context that we assign to a particular experience or situation. And by changing the meaning, you often change the emotional response and the behavior that follows.
How does that work? Can you give an example maybe from the book?
Sure. The book talks about reframing things people see as limitations. So imagine someone who says, I can't speak in public, I just get too nervous.
Okay, common fear.
Reframing might involve exploring, well, what's the positive intention behind those nerves? Maybe the nervousness is actually a sign that they really care about doing a good job, that the presentation is important to them.
Shifting it from fear to caring.
Exactly. By shifting the perspective, the frame, from just a negative limitation, I'm nervous, to a potentially positive underlying reason, I care, you can open up new ways for them to think about and approach public speaking.
I see.
The book even provides a kind of structured reframing outline. It guides you through steps like identifying the problematic pattern, generating alternative meanings or interpretations, and then thinking about how these new perspectives could lead to different actions or feelings in the future.
So it's a structured way to find a different angle on a problem, maybe making it feel less like a brick wall.
That's a good way to put it. Then they also get into something called leveraged inductions and pattern interruption.
Pattern interruption. That sounds a bit jarring.
It can be, momentarily. The idea is to disrupt someone's usual established patterns of expectation or behavior. This disruption can create a very brief moment of confusion or surprise.
Okay.
And in that moment, they might be more open, more suggestible.
Can you give an example? The book must have one.
Oh, yeah. The classic one they use is the handshake interruption.
The handshake. How does that work?
So you go to shake someone's hand, the normal expected social ritual, right? But then, just as you're about to connect, you do something slightly unexpected.
Right.
Maybe you lift their hand slightly differently, or you gently turn their wrist, or just pause for a fraction of a second longer than usual before completing the grip. It's subtle.
Okay.
But that tiny break in the expected pattern can momentarily occupy their conscious mind like, huh, what was that?
Yeah.
And potentially make them more receptive to a suggestion or direction in the moments immediately following.
I get it. It's like a little mental speed bump that creates a brief opening.
Sort of, yeah. They also discuss the concept of overload.
Overload, like too much information.
Exactly. This technique involves deliberately presenting the conscious mind with more information, more chunks of data, than it can comfortably process all at once.
Why would you do that?
The idea is that when the conscious mind gets a bit overwhelmed, unconscious processes might become more influential. It relates to that old idea of our short-term memory capacity, the magic number 7 plus or minus 2 pieces of information.
Right, Miller's Law.
Yeah. If you give someone significantly more distinct things to track simultaneously, some of that information tends to bypass conscious filtering and analysis.
So you're kind of gently flooding the conscious gatekeeper to allow the unconscious mind more room to play.
That's one way to think about it, yeah. And finally, they briefly touch upon an even more complex idea called stacking realities, which involves layering different kinds of perceptual experiences. But that gets pretty advanced.
Wow, okay. That's quite a toolbox. from simple focus exercises to pattern interrupts and overloading. How are these principles and techniques actually applied in a helpful way, according to the book?
Well, a key theme that runs through the application side is the importance of process instructions.
Process instructions,
Yeah.
meaning you focus on the how, not the what.
Exactly. Instead of telling someone exactly what outcome to achieve, you will feel confident, the focus is on guiding them through a process of exploration and change. You give instructions that help them tap into their own internal resources, their own capabilities, and find their own unique solutions or shifts.
So it's much more about facilitating their own journey, their own discovery, rather than just directing them to a specific destination.
Precisely. And this naturally leads into the idea of generative change.
Generative change, making new things happen.
Yeah, it's about facilitating the emergence of new, resourceful behaviors, feelings, or insights from within the person themselves. It's not about installing something new from the outside, but about helping them generate solutions using their own existing, perhaps untapped resources. Empowering them, really.
That sounds much more collaborative and respectful.
It is.
And what about afterwards? After someone has had maybe a significant shift or insight during one of these focus states, how do you help make sure that sticks?
Good question. The book briefly mentions the value of cleanup routines.
Cleanup routines, like tidying up mentally.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
These are basically techniques or simple processes designed to help individuals fully process and integrate whatever new experiences, understandings, or learnings they might have gained.
So helping them make sense of it all.
Exactly. Helping them make sense of what happened, connect it to their broader life, and sort of solidify any positive changes or new perspectives. Integration is key.
You know, it really sounds like, even though this book is, what, over 40 years old now?
Yeah, 1981.
The core ideas about communication, attention, and how we process experience are still incredibly relevant today, maybe even more so.
I completely agree. Absolutely. And, while the early chapters don't have like a big flashing ethics section,
Right.
the whole approach, the collaborative nature of the exercises, the constant emphasis on utilizing and respecting the individual's unique responses, that implicitly counters that old fear-based idea of hypnosis as coercive control. It frames it as facilitation.
Yeah, definitely comes across that way. Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. For someone listening, what are the main takeaways, the key insights you think they should hold on to from this deep dive into transformations?
Well, I think the biggest thing is how the book reframes hypnosis itself. It takes it away from being some, mysterious power,
Right?
and presents it as a really practical set of skills centered around understanding and then skillfully using patterns of communication and focused attention. Natural processes.
Okay.
So hopefully you've gained a better sense of how to recognize these natural trance-like states of focused attention. You've learned about some simple and maybe some more advanced techniques for guiding that attention. And crucially, grasped that core principle of utilization, working with the person's own responses to help facilitate change they want.
So fundamentally, it's about getting smarter about the subtle mechanics of how we focus, how we use language, and how we connect with ourselves and others. That feels like a really powerful shift in perspective.
It really is. And maybe it leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener, to mull over.
Yeah.
How might just having a better understanding of these principles about attention, about subtle communication patterns, about rapport, how might that awareness subtly shift your own daily interactions? Could becoming more aware of these little shifts in focus in yourself and others offer you maybe new insights, new ways to understand how you learn, how you connect, or even how you approach personal growth or change?
That's definitely given me something to chew on. It opens up a lot of possibilities.
It does. And obviously, the book goes into way more detail in the later chapters. For those listening whose curiosity has really been sparked, digging deeper into transformations or maybe exploring other resources on NLP and Ericksonian approaches, well, that could offer even richer layers of understanding.
Absolutely. And that brings us towards the end of another deep dive. We really hope you found this exploration into transformations and these ideas about hypnosis and communication as fascinating as we did.
Yeah, it's compelling stuff.
We'll definitely look into delving into related topics in future deep dives, especially based on your feedback, so please do keep those suggestions coming our way.